We're glad that you're here tonight. We have, I think, an incredibly interesting opportunity to hear from two important experts about a topic that concerns us and interests all of us. It has to do with radicalization. How it is that you take a young person, maybe who is just a kid down the street who you've known growing up, and all of a sudden later you see that they have become part of a very heinous act as maybe a terrorist. So tonight we're going to look at radicalization, and we're going to have two expert presenters discuss two important concepts in that trajectory. First, we are very happy to have Ann-Kathrin Kuder, who I'm sure I've mispronounced your name, but I'm doing the best I can. She is a Fulbright teaching assistant here, a Fulbright Scholar at Mercer for a year, teaching in the Department of Foreign Languages, teaching German. She grew up in northern Germany, a town called Hanover. She went to Leibniz Universität, where she studied political science and English. And she wrote a very interesting master's thesis that focuses on the topic of this evening, Extremism in Germany, Old and New Problem. And so she will bring not only her academic expertise, but also her personal experience to this conversation tonight. And she helps us understand more of the motivation behind radicalization. What is it that moves students to that position? Then following her, Jeff Battcher, who is the principal at Battcher Communications, native of Macon, Georgia, has a bachelor's in business communication from Mercer, and then an executive MBA in finance from Georgia State University. Jeff has extensive global communications experience. He has run the global public relations departments for Delta Airlines, Bell South, Level 3 Communications. He is consistently and often a consultant to Fortune 500 companies and other public relations, advertising, and marketing firms. His clients include HP, UPS, the United Nations, and Sony. Jeff is going to talk with us tonight on the basis of his extensive experience in social media, public media, about the mechanism for radicalization, how it is that social media becomes the avenue or the vehicle through which young people are radicalized. And so in just a moment, Ann-Kathrin will come and talk about radicalization and its motivation, and then following her, Jeff will come and talk about the mechanism. Following that, we hope to engage in a time of conversation, so be ready with questions to ask each of them. I wish that you would join me now in welcoming both of our speakers, and Ann-Kathrin, if you would come and join me.
Willkommen. Welcome, and thank you for having me tonight. I feel very honored. Terror, fear, mourning. Terrorism has shown its face in very different perspectives and all over the world. It is meant to destabilize our democratic systems and our values. It is meant to scare us. In January 2015, I went to the Fulbright Commission in Berlin to apply for the scholarships that I luckily received. And at this exact same weekend, there were the terror attacks on Paris. They were meant to hit the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, and just because of their critical display of some Islamic symbols and also of the Prophet Muhammad. It was a shock to me and also to many others in Europe. And at this weekend, a lot of politicians, like for example our Chancellor, Angela Merkel, they all met in front of the Brandenburger Gate to show their sympathy, to stand in solidarity with the victims. We had there representatives of the Christian religion of the Islam as well as Jewish representatives. And it was a strong sign because it said, we stand together, we respect each other's religion, and we are not scared. Je suis Charlie became a symbol for the solidarity movement all around the globe and found its way into social media. A lot of my friends, a lot of Europeans, but everywhere in the world, this sign became very crucial in showing their solidarity. A few weeks later, I decided to write my master's thesis on the topic of extremism. And I used a categorical analysis to focus on the three main groups that we have in Germany, the three main extremist groups. At that point, Charlie Hebdo, or the attacks on Charlie Hebdo, were the most recent ones. But shortly after I finished my master's thesis and came here to Macon, there were new attacks on Paris. But this time, they didn't target a single organization, but they targeted all citizens, which is interesting, sad to mention. The question that remained is why? Why would a human being develop into a cold-hearted killer? Why would someone do this? Terrorism has become a threat to the Western world. And not only in these past days, weeks, months, or years, but for decades it has been built up. So the answer to my question can be found in the process of radicalization. But let's start with the definition of extremism, what I focused also on in my master's thesis. Extremism, as you can see, is the holding of extreme political or religious views which are in opposition to the free democratic basic order. So if you envision our society as a pie diagram, in the core, in the middle, you will find democratic ideas, people that are real democratic at their hearts. But there are a whole variety of different views, political stances, ideas, ideologies of different religions, all in this society. And the more you get to each side, the more you get to the extreme. And on the outer edge, you can find extremism. It's just a very small part of society. It can be right-wing, left-wing, it could be Islamism, but it could be any kind of extremism that is in opposition to democratic values. So only a very, very small part of this part of extremism can be called terrorism. And these are the people who use violence for their aims. In my master's thesis, I concentrated on the German context. And as I said, we have three basic branches. We have right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism, and Islamism in Germany. While I did my thesis, I realized that while being ideologically very different, these extremist parts have strong similarities too. So I analyzed the potential risks that each branch has, and this is what I came up with. There are similarities, as I said. For example, you can see here the organizational parallels on the left side. And these are tied to the form in which we see extremism in our society. So it could be in the form of a party. That means these are very strongly organized, but normally also peaceful, or in the form of subcultural extremism, which means that it is weakly organized and they are prepared to use violence. That means these two forms are not only found in Islamism or left-wing extremism, but they are found in all three branches, and they are quite universal. Also interesting to note are the ideological parallels. First of all, extremists believe to know the sole truth. Well, it's interesting because just in Germany we already have 3 truths then. And it is interesting to note that this seems to be a very important part for extremism in itself. My opinion, there is no truth. Second, they fight for their aims uncompromising and relentless. So they do have the idea that they have to fight for this truth in order to succeed. And third, the propensity for conspiracy theories. Well, everything that doesn't fit into this certain mindset, into this truth, needs explaining, and therefore these theories are used. I also looked at the quantitative potential. So when we think about Germany, a lot of people think that right-wing extremism is the most important part that we do have, and maybe also the biggest problem. When we look at the numbers, and these are from the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution from 2013, we can see that in numbers we have around 34,000 individuals for Islamism, around 28,000 individuals for left-wing extremism, and around 22,000 individuals for right-wing extremism. This is pretty interesting. I think that numbers have changed recently quite a bit. We had a lot of a strong movement to the right, which is tied to what's happening politically right now. But these were the numbers from 2013, and they depict, these numbers depict what we had these past years. And what's interesting to mention is that it's not right-wing extremism that has the largest numbers of individuals supporting it. But the question is still there. Why do citizens become extremists? So, as you can see, this looks quite complex. And of course, it is a complex process, the process of radicalization. And I still do not claim completeness. But what is interesting to see here is that we have basically 6 branches, and these are quite universal. I have a second one where I just narrowed this one down to the 6 points. I think this is much easier to see for today because we have not the time to concentrate on every detail. So what you can see here are, first of all, intolerance and prejudices. We all use prejudices to structure our world in easy terms, to orientate, and especially in a world of globalization and increasing complexity, we need to structure it. So there has been a lot of disorientation, a lot of anxiety because of very complex systems, a complex world that we live in. There's nothing wrong about that. But what is problematic if these prejudices result in a very strong black and white thinking? There is a theory called the theory of cognitive dissonance, And it says that we have a demand for consistency. And ambiguity, experienced as tension, is what is the problem if we have this demand. So we try to make everything work for us, work for our mental categories. And the problem here is when you have too many stereotypes and you don't challenge them from time to time, prejudices can exercise power over parts of society and over other humans, because they can implement discrimination and strong hierarchies. So this part, intolerance, in connection with prejudices, can be very problematic. It can also be used to do enemy stereotypes, to do enemy stereotyping. That has been done to the media, to politicians, to ethnicities, to foreigners, to a lot of different groups. Second point is the glorification of power and violence. Extremists love power. They want to have power. And some of them, the part that uses violence is called terrorism. So we have here a strong tie that is important, and it is important to see that this violence is only the surface that we see, but inside these human beings there is hate. And hate as a strong emotion could have different causes. One theory says that it might have something to do with the willingness for obedience that is trained in early childhood, so that children who have to obey their parents learn to, at the first, to have clear hierarchies and to demand leadership structures, but also to have a certain guilt inside of them. So as soon as some of these individuals start to hate themselves for their weakness, they start to have hate in their hearts, so to say. And this hate can be channeled to other humans. So it can be, for example, channeled to minorities or to someone else, to some enemy type. Loneliness. The feeling of isolation, the feeling of not being a part of society, of not being integrated. It is a strong factor too. So people who do not feel welcomed do have a certain very different feelings about this society. And again, as a human being, they will have the demand for group cohesiveness and recognition. And if this is not, if this is a demand that is not pleased in a society for some parts of the society, this can be a problem. And when we look through these, this is of course not, I cannot give you the universal truth to why someone gets radicalized, but these are some points to keep in mind when you think about the process of radicalization. Another one, emotionalization, very, very important. Emotionalization is used to trigger our youth to get them into the radicalization process. It is strongly used in the media and the internet, and Jeff Battcher will talk a little more about this point of media that is very important when we talk about extremism. Then we again have the opposition to the free democratic basic order. So this opposition is a very important point when we think about extremism, but also about radicalization. It is this feeling of opposition that drives people into a more radical stance. And the last point, ideology. I want you to keep in mind that what I think is very important in this process are the emotions. It is not the argumentation that is behind the ideologies. We have right-wing, left-wing, or Islamism in the case of Germany, but I do not believe that it is really the argumentation of these extremists that drive people into their arms, but it is the emotions, or there are the emotions that are important in this process. Last week, I went through campus thinking about my presentation today, and I came across Jesse Mercer. He has some quotes around him, and I read through some of them, and I thought that some were really up to date. So when we think about radicalization and about what it does to our societies, we should also think about what we can do to prevent it from happening. And I want you to remember, please be open-minded, change your perspective from time to time, and remember this quote from Jesse Mercer. The most fruitful source to error is ignorance.
I told the IT guy not to go home yet. You know, when you do presentations, they always tell you never to follow anybody that's really, really bright, and also talented, and a Fulbright Scholar as well. So I hope you're going to bear with the guy from here in Macon, Georgia, for just a little bit. Ann-Kathrin did a great job in talking about the why, and what I want to do is talk about the how. How is extremism becoming so easily proliferated throughout the entire world? Well, let's go back just a little bit. What does a nuclear bomb and the internet have in common? Well, quite honestly, a great deal. Because in 1962, the Rand Corporation was asked by the Air Force, we're really concerned about the Soviet Union. How can we make sure that we can have communications with our missiles, with our bombers? And the Rand Corporation very brilliantly said, if there is such thing as a nuclear bomb, what we can put in place is called a packet switch network. So not an engineering class here, but packet switch networks are still in use today. And what that does is put the beauty of redundancy in place. So if one computer goes down, there's still others that can be used and communicated. Air Force loved this, put this in place. That's the basis of the internet, in 45 seconds there, that we have in place today. It's remarkable. So the Rand Corporation said, but we want this to be open. And so did, obviously, everybody else. So the military net, the ALPANET. Then we go to the National Science Foundation, said in 1985, let's make sure that this is open and sourceable and something that everybody can use. The reason we have all the things we have today is because it's open. And the confusion that's going on now between Apple and it's going on between Google. How can we let people get in and look at your stuff? We don't want you to look at your stuff. It's supposed to be open. So from there, we go to this. How many cat videos can we share on how many networks? I mean, it's just incredible to where we are. So let's look at where we think it's going to go. And it's only going to increase by respective regions. The colors are a little hard to see, but you can see that mainly the Middle East and Latin America and Africa, some of the more underdeveloped countries, if you will, are going to continue to grow and grow and grow with their internet activities and their access to it as more and more wireless proliferation comes about. So here we are today. ISIS sends 200,000 social media posts a day. 200,000 a day are sent by ISIS. 45,000 Twitter accounts are used by ISIS and their supporters. So how did we get to this? And when you talk about a double-edged sword, most of the time you think, well, double-edged is, in our parlance, good and bad. But double-edged for what is being done by the extremists is very good. They've got a great internal and external communications plan. When I was at Bell South and Delta, that's what I strived to have, was a very good internal and external communications plan. Internal, to communicate with my employees. What are our goals? What do we want to accomplish for this coming year? Let's get them motivated. The extremists, let's communicate what our goals are. Let's communicate what we want to accomplish and make sure we're all on the same page. On the external side of the house, you want to make sure that you're focusing on the media relations and the public relations of this to make sure you get everybody on your side, or those that you can influence or may be susceptible to influence on your side. So when we talk about public relations, and this is kind of a throwaway quote, if you will, but it's the process of building mutual beneficial relationships between your client and your public. That's what we do in this country. That's what I do to this day. That's what they're doing there. It's the same exact thing, making sure that you're getting everybody on the same page, going in the same direction. And what I like to say that communications and public relations is storytelling. It's no different than anything that's been done for thousands and thousands of years. It's telling your story the way you want it told, so it can be repeated the way you want it told over and over and over again. The Greeks. I'm always reluctant to say anything about the Greeks or religion with my good friend Dr. Nash here, who will always correct me when I'm wrong, but the greatest storytellers were the Greeks. For thousands of years, they had traveling storytellers who did nothing but tell their stories in the proper way. And when we talk about events, the Nicene Council might be one of the greatest public relations events of all time. Seriously, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way at all, but the Pope and everybody got together and said, you know what, we maybe should have just like one Bible. There's a whole bunch of them out there, and there's all these different things, and we haven't decided on the different, canonizations. And I tell you what, let's just come together and have one document. So they're all on the same page. They have one prescribed message point document that they can go by and take and get more people to believe what they want them to believe. Our country, United States of America. Back in the early days, the Jeffersons and the Adams had their own public relations men. There were no women doing public relations, unfortunately, back then. And they were called puffers because they would puff up and extol the exploits of whoever they were working for at the time. And the puffers did a great job. And one of the best of the puffers, but he really was a great public relations person of his time who wrote Common Sense, was Thomas Paine. I think you can arguably say we never would have been in a Revolutionary War without that book. His book got everybody on the same page, told the proper story, and made everybody realize this is what we have to do. We have to be all together on this. There was nobody, in my opinion, better than him. So we talk about the good guys, the good things that have happened with public relations. Well, the bad guys have figured this out and have figured it out a long time ago. So I don't know how many of you know, I'm sure somebody might know who Leni Riefenstahl was. She was the person who put together, at the time, and still many consider, one of the greatest public relations movies ever made, Triumph of the Will, that talked about all the greatness of the Nazi empire, the Nazi world. It was the most effective, technologically innovative propaganda movies ever made. And it was so brilliant in the fact that it used the medium of the day. It wasn't a pamphlet, it wasn't a book, it wasn't people getting together, it was movies. Get as many people as you can in a room, let's disseminate our message in the best way we can, in the most effective way we can, and the quickest way we can. It was, quite honestly, it helped to galvanize the Nazis to the disastrous people that they became. So let's zoom ahead about 80 years. Let's talk about where we are now. And when you talk about what what is being done now, it's more than anything else to shock and intimidate. And we've all seen those horrific videos, some of which I don't understand how some people can watch, but they're there. And they're brilliant in what they do. Do you know that ISIS has just launched their own Android app? They've got their own app. We think that, we're the only people that can develop an app, but there's an app that's out there. They're using it to plan and to communicate. And one thing that's very underreported is to finance and pay. They have Bitcoin that they're using out there. ISIS networks, Boko Haram, all are using Bitcoin as well. They're using the medium of today. They don't have a movie, they're not print a book. What's out there that's easily accessible and open to tell their respective story. Cell phone ownership, just in Africa, look how quickly they're becoming almost par with us. And it'll be very shortly that most of the underdeveloped countries, if you will catch the United States with cell phones. And you have to remember, there's no landline network. Africa was never built to put a landline network in place. Too expensive, too complicated. United States, we had a copper-based network from the very beginning. So now they all have the incredible device that we all use right in their hands. Look at the penetration that's there and the number of internet users, 331 million, 125 million Facebook users. And again, when you think of internet, don't think of somebody sitting at a computer. Nobody is sitting at a computer virtually anywhere in Africa or the Middle East. They have their handheld device. That's their internet, which opens up the entire world and all the good things and all the nefarious things that come with that. What's so fascinating to me about this, again, is what is being used for in the respective countries. And I like to look at make or receive payments. Untraceable monies can be sent, small amounts, large amounts, anywhere in the world, or to, again, an ISIS commander. So you can see that it is being used across the board by the respective countries in different ways, but make or receive payments and then access to social networks. That's how they disseminate the information. They've got their handheld device. You can go to a network of a social network, Facebook, Twitter, and get all the information, the propaganda. It's there. It's waiting for you. Interesting about Twitter, and a quick update to this, but you can see again the locations that are claimed in the profile and all the number of the Twitter census by ISIS, people that have ISIS-related Twitter accounts right now by country. I don't know if you saw the USA Today story that Twitter's really been at the forefront of this, and they finally suspended 125,000 ISIS-related accounts Friday. Just Friday. They finally, because they were getting sued. It's the only reason they stopped it, because they were getting sued. So Twitter has been at the forefront of what ISIS has been doing and continues to do. But they're going to shut down 125,000 accounts, and then there's going to be 125,000 accounts that will start back up again under a different hashtag, under a different name. It's tough to stop an open and accessible network. So we've obviously talked about the extremists and the tools that they're using, but I want to talk, it was handled brilliantly by Ann-Kathrin, but very quickly, if I may, on why, from a personal experience. For this past year in 2015, I worked for the United Nations, and specifically worked for a woman named Amina Mohammed. Amina Mohammed reported to Ban Ki-moon. She was responsible for the strategic development goals, getting all 193 countries on the same page, as some of you have read about the strategic development goals. She's from Nigeria, brilliant woman. I feel so fortunate, again, to be a kid from Macon, Georgia, that got to spend this much time with somebody that has such a vast amount of experience. But what I did for her was did media training with her, and then also helped them with their message points. Again, framing the story. A lot of people like to call things spin. It's more framing the story. So I helped frame the story for her of what we wanted to do going forward to get the United Nations countries to vote, which I'm grateful to say they all did. But she told a fascinating story about Lake Chad. And talk about an underreported story that very few people know about. It was the 6th largest lake in the world in 1963. And look at what has become of Lake Chad, to where it is now only 500 square miles. And I don't want to debate climate change. I hope most people believe what scientists tell them. But one of the direct results of this lake drying up is because lack of rainfall and climate change. And climate change has directly resulted in Boko Haram. There is no doubt that Boko Haram was started because of lack of resources, no jobs, no food, no transportation across the river, nothing. All those, it's hard to see, are Boko Haram owned, operated, and cities that used to be the outline of the lake. All of them are there, at 22 by 22 square miles from the devastation of a lake that at one point was the lifeblood of all those surrounding countries. So what do we do now? So we've kind of, been somewhat detrimental in all the things that are happening. But I believe that it's incumbent upon us. And I get criticized for being very naive sometimes, but I think it's incumbent upon us to do those small things. There's over 350 people in this country who've been radicalized, who have been trying to go overseas. We don't know who that is. A small gesture, a small act of kindness to anybody that you think may be in need here or overseas can make a huge difference in somebody's life. So my message is always remember the small things and just be nice to people, because it's incumbent upon us to make sure that this radicalization doesn't continue and continue and continue. Thank you. A good slide to leave up.
Fascinating conversation. And you're going to be able to participate in that conversation and make it even more fascinating. We want to take some time to field questions, and so I'm going to ask our presenters if they will stay for a few moments and to entertain the questions that you might have. If you have a question, I'm going to ask that you just raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you'll come down to the microphone so that everybody can hear, and state your name and then your question, and if you will, direct it to one of our two presenters. So who would like to ask first? Okay, please.
My name is Richard Elliott. I'm with the medical school, and I want to thank you for this program and these wonderful presentations. I want to know if you can make a link between your different presentations. So, Ms. Huber, you spoke to 6 factors leading to radicalization, one of which was loneliness. And Mr. Battcher, you spoke to the dissemination of social media throughout the world. Can you see a connection between these factors and social media that might be used in a way that we can combat radicalization? Is that question clear?
Yes. Thank you. Do you hear me? Yes. Okay, that's a very good question. There is a link between our two presentations, and when you remember this one very big mind map that I showed you, there was one arm also directing at media. Media is definitely one of the most used sources of radicalization nowadays. It plays a big role, and it is interesting to think about how we can use it also to combat extremism. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of possibilities that we have, and I think it's not yet investigated enough to think about what is possible there. In my master's thesis, I also thought about how can we use this knowledge at school. Because I did my master in education, I want to be a teacher at a high school in Germany, and I thought about, okay, we have this radicalization, and it is very, very important to protect kids in school from these influences. And the media plays a big role in that too. So we have heard there are apps, I didn't know about that, from ISIS right now, and a lot of other things out there. And what is important, what I think is very important, to emphasize the democratic order that we live in, and to get, especially the youth, to understand what it means and what it means to be a critical citizen, what it means to have your own opinion, and to promote, as a teacher especially, our democratic system.
One quick comment is one of the most effective means of recruiting European and United States people to go overseas and do things is once they go there, they're no different than us. Someone takes a Facebook photo like we're at a football game and sends it back and says, hey guys, look, I'm with all the ISIS. They're not bad guys, we're having a good time. Here's my selfie with the folks at ISIS. Seriously. That is what's used, and with so many of the people in Europe and everything else, once they get there, they send pictures back and put it on their Facebook page like being with ISIS is like a cool thing, like they just met Mick Jagger. So it's amazing how it all comes full circle, at least for me.
Great answers. Thank you. Good question. Very good question. Who else has a question that they'd like to pose? Yes, sir.
Guten Abend. I'm Dan Murray, and I'm from Mercer Engineering Research Center. And I have a question for Ann-Kathrin. You talked about the fact that there's been an increase of right-wing extremists in Germany. Do you feel that, and you didn't really go in depth on that, but do you feel that has to do with Angela Merkel's policy, her liberal policies of allowing entry into Germany for a large number of refugees? And are you concerned about potential future risks to Germany, either from right-wing extremists as a result of this, or because of the increased number of refugees that have been allowed to come into Germany, which is, as you know, a very relatively small country?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very up-to-date question. True. We have the refugee crisis right now, and I have talked about that topic in the class of a colleague, just the refugee crisis, because it's a topic in itself, and I couldn't cover it here today. But it is a topic also that a lot of Germans today, right now, think about, they are scared of, or that they are worried about in a way. And there have been very different reactions. We have seen a lot of Germans being very open to the refugees, welcoming them and donating food, donating resources, money, all of that. But we have also seen extremist groups, and I'm talking here, and you mentioned that, especially the right-wing extremism, that they have done the opposite thing and really showed disrespect to the whole situation. So what I feel is that I'm a little scared about what is happening now, that people really move to the right side. And this was nothing that I experienced before I came here. That was in August. So the whole refugee crisis heated up while I was here. And a friend of mine, he said, well, when you come back, you will not recognize the political Germany anymore. And I hope that's not true. I still think that we have a very strong democratic order, and we have to keep in mind that extremism is only a very small part of society. So I don't think we have to be scared, but we surely have to focus on what can we do to prevent these situations, what can we do to help these people also. And of course, as you said, this fear is a lot connected to not knowing who is getting into the country, if there are extremists on the other side getting now into Germany. Political-wise, I don't know. There have been decisions made. We will see how it all develops. We don't know yet, but we are facing strong difficulties, and we have to deal with them now.
Thank you. Other questions? And I was going to say, we'll privilege our students. Any student with a question? Okay, yes, please, come forward. Yeah. And then we'll come here. Okay, great.
So forgive me if my question's a little bit vague, but
And your name first, please.
Joseph, yes. And so my question goes to both of you. And I suppose whenever you mentioned the UN, it made me think, what role do you see international organizations, as well as nations themselves, in being able to, handle a crisis like Lake Chad, as you mentioned? What efforts can the international community do to sort of address these concerns before extremist organizations can sort of, fill the void?
The United Nations had been talking about Lake Chad for years, and nothing got done. And at the risk of being too political, so many things in Africa is Africans killing Africans, nobody cares about. And in Lake Chad, there's very little natural resources. So there's no oil, there's no gold, there's nothing to be mined there. So most of the country doesn't care. And again, Africans killing Africans. So there was a UN mission that went there that said, look, they knew this was happening. It's no different than what's happening across the country now with what's happening with the seas rising, and people know about it, but to get people to take action and to realize it is a different story. And I hope you're from the School of Collaborative Journalism. I hope there's somebody here from the School of Collaborative Journalism. Because that's what I'm passionate about too, is getting young journalists interested in what's going on around the world and write about these stories. Let everybody know in the environment of which we live and communicate. We need strong journalism, and I'm hope that the School of Journalism continues to be very viable.
Great, yes. Thank you. And the question back here then, please. Yes, come and tell us your name and your question. I know, we'll wait. We're patient.
I'm Justin, I'm a student. And you were talking about how emotionality really is one of the biggest factors, you think, from recruitment. And I think that I totally agree with that. But the one thing I was asking, when you move towards beyond terrestrial grievances, towards like suicide bombing and things like that involve giving up of someone's life, it does seem to involve a belief in some sort of metaphysical principles. And I was wondering, how much do you really think the ideology and dogma that you talked about, like how much do you think that plays in? Because I think that a lot of it does seem to be terrestrial, but I also wonder how much religion and how much an expenditure of belief comes into play.
So, if I got you right, you would question the importance of ideology in comparison to emotionalization and emotions in general?
Yeah, and also like you talked about over there with the lake in Nigeria as well, about terrestrial grievances as well. And so I was wondering, how much do you think, what's the most important, and do you think that ideology plays a big role, as much of a role?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Ideology plays a role. Of course it does. But the question is, especially when we think about prevention, how do we prevent these things from happening? And what studies showed is that you cannot argue with these people. If you try to come along with very strong arguments in favor of democracy or in favor of humanity, you will not get these people to change their minds. And this is why I believe it is not that much about really the arguments, but about the emotions that are tied up to them. And it's still important to argue. It's still important to argue because you might not change the ideas of the person in front of you who is in some respect extreme, but you might change what others think that hear you talk about it. So even though it might not be always a question of argumentation, it is still important to argue.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yes, right down here, please.
First, my name is Sarah, and I want to thank you for your pretty well done presentation. I have two questions.
Okay.
The first one is for Mrs. Kathrin.
May I ask you to get just a little closer to the mic?
Okay.
There we go.
My first question is to Mrs. Kathrin. So I know that you didn't have a lot of time to go over each cause to convert into radicalization, but just in terms of loneliness, can you more specify the causes that can lead to radicalization? And for Mr. Jeff, in the internet, I've already heard about how ISIS is using internet to push people to radicalize. However, I heard about something called the dark web, and in the dark web they're actually pretty active, more than the web that the common people actually access. So just want to have more clarification in these two questions, and thank you.
Okay. You said you would like to know more, right? Let's see if I can pull up more. Yeah, I will do a test afterwards. Okay. Oops. No, it doesn't want to do that. Okay. It doesn't, because it wasn't the first slide. Okay, I'm sorry for this. So if we recap the images we saw, these are some that we talked about. And then we talked about extremism and Germany and the potential risks that we have in Germany, and then the process of radicalization. So here we are. This is very complex, as you can see, and what I pointed out in the very next slide were only 6 major points. You can find them on here too. So these are the 6 that are tied to the term radicalization. And they spread out into more detail, each of them. And as I said, this is still not complete. This is just, this is based on Germany, based on the 3 branches that I have talked about. And it is just, this mind map, I designed it for this presentation. So if I would design it for a more deeper look into every branch, I would maybe even come up with much more. I'm not really sure what you are interested in to hear more about. Could you maybe specify on that? Okay, the part of the loneliness. Loneliness might not be connected to a group, first of all, but more to a person. Because as a group, you most of all, I would say it, will not feel lonely in the sense that I was talking about. Because here I put up loneliness to emphasize the point that it is about an individual that has a certain stance in a society. And being lonely, or having the feeling of being lonely, having the feeling of being an outsider, puts you at a higher risk of getting into radicalization. That doesn't mean that every extremist is lonely, or that loneliness is the only cause, but it is one cause that gets you into a position where you are more highly perceivable for extremist ideas, and there we are again at the ideology part. Okay.
And on the dark web, is, for those of you that know what the dark web is, that is the cesspool of all evil in mankind. So you've got the internet, then the dark web is a very hard and untraceable IP addresses that is used all around the world for human trafficking. Every credit card number that's ever been stolen, you can go buy on the dark web right now. It is no doubt that ISIS is using that, and so is everyone else. It's just another layer, and it's harder for anybody, our government, anybody else, to do any tracing on that. Just like when you get your credit card and social security number stolen, it's out there on the dark web. And it's being used by them and everybody else to, unfortunately, great success.
Very good. Okay, a question back here, and then we'll come up to Imam Fofana. Okay, please. Yes.
Hi, my name is Richard Camino. I'm from the Mercer faculty. Thank you very much, both of you, for this very enlightening presentation. I just want to make a comment. The RAND Corporation just published in January a study that was looking why we are not having the amount of radicalization in the West Bank that has been expected.
You said the West Bank?
Yeah.
West Bank of Jordan? Okay.
The West Bank in Palestine.
Palestine, okay.
So this study was done by the RAND Corporation in Palestine in 2013, and they just published the results of the study. What they found is that the reason that there has been not the amount of radicalization expected in that area was that family apparently is one of the strongest deterrents to radicalization, and they are more important than peers. That's one of the things that they found out in this study. And the other thing is that one of the deterrents is that the feeling or the idea that of the futility of violence. So this is one of, they had several findings, but I think that those two are important. And I want to make just one more comment.
All right, let's go to a question. Let's keep it to a question.
Okay.
So please, yeah, your question?
My question will be, why the ideology of democracy, where do you get this information? Because I am not clear that that has any relevance on the issues of radicalization.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. For my thesis, I worked with categories, and of course I needed also definitions for the terms that I was operating with. And one definition that was clearly important was the one of extremism. I used sources in the German literature mainly, some also from the US, and used a definition that is up to date in the German discourse. So I cannot, since I'm not a native speaker, I cannot recall it from my memory and translate it at the same time. Very sorry about that. But if you are more interested into the sources I invite you to talk with me about it later. And I can also give you some information about these.
Good, thank you. Who else has a question? Imam Fofana, you had a question.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Imam Adam Fofana. I serve as an imam for the Islamic Center of Middle Georgia. Both of you have done a wonderful job to highlight this issue, especially the gentleman. I would like to comment on your pointing out about the Lake of Chad and the poverty and the difficulties surrounding the area, and Boko Haram taking advantage of that. Now you can multiply that in third world countries, or mostly where Muslim majority countries are, thinking about poverty, thinking about failed state, thinking about a lot of chaos that these people are going through that might contribute to youth being taken and hijacked by the extremists, to their side. And I really appreciate pointing that out. And what can we do to help the situation get it better or get it worse? I mean, what are we doing and what can we do? That's my first question for you in terms of, the developed countries, United States, Europe. The other question is for the lady there. I think Dr. Dean Craig, the first forum we had here, your comment was very enlightening that all our books, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, we have these verses that if someone take it out of context, you can be radicalized. It's not just a problem of Islam or Quran. Now, in your presentation, one of the things you point out was Islamism. And some Muslims will have problem with that. I'm not suggesting that you change your thesis because of that. But how can we help, like we say, Abrahamic tradition and faith, Jew, Christian, Muslim? You have 1.6 billion Muslims. Religion is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. But how can we help winning back the name of the religion, the faith of the people, from these radicalized people, from these extremists, from these terrorists, and use them as a terrorist without implicating people's faith with what they are doing?
Very
Thank
good.
you very much.
Thank you. Jeff, we'll let you get started.
I'll take the first one. And I think it's as simple as looking at UN-approved operations. There's several nonprofits that are working, I know, to try to combat the severe poverty that's happening, that Boko Haram is controlling there around Lake Chad. So I would look at approved, high-ranking nonprofits and UN-approved projects and support those. I certainly wouldn't suggest anybody going and visiting and trying to clean up the area around where Boko Haram is. I think that the best thing to do is to try to support them with well-run nonprofits with your money.
Islam is certainly not Islamism or Islamism. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It is very important that we point that out. And I used Islamism because it is one of the three major streams or branches in Germany right now. That's why. That doesn't mean that there are not other extremist groups from different religions. And I think to raise awareness of that fact, we have to be very precise with our language. And we cannot confuse Islam with Islamism. Because what I tried to convey as a message is when we look at a society, we have a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas and political ideas, but also religious ideas. And only what is at the edge, so to say, is extremism. And this can be in a lot of variety, in a lot of shapes. It can occur in a lot of shapes. It does not only have to be Islamism.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. A question here and then a question here. Okay? And we'll let these be our last two questions.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Yiren, and well, I have this question, like from your presentation. I'm sorry, can I just?
Yeah, there you go. Good.
Well, from your presentation, I get this impression as well as my own experience. That is like the say radicalization is creeping, is devouring the central, the mainstream people. I think that's why Ms. Kuder, you said you went to Germany and you feel afraid that many people have turned to radical, right? So from my own experience, like I went to internet, and I saw some people would say like, first of all, I'm from China, and I saw that there are people like the Chinese sentiment on the internet was like, say the Paris shooting happened, and they say like the French totally deserve it or whatever, like don't care or like this kind of thing, and say the internet is not equally effective to both sides. We're like asymmetrical. We the radical people, they can publish their message, and people who might have this bent would just simply follow it. Whereas we the mainstream people would have a hard time combating them. Like we all know the internet debate is the worst, is the least effective one. So what can we do to stop this?
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good to see you, Aaron, first of all. He's one of my students, or has been. Yes. That was, again, a long question. Well, media, okay, we do have in the media, and that is very true, we have the whole spectrum, right? But what gets a lot of attention are often those messages that are very radical. And this is an interesting topic too, because why is that? Why is it also that we always remember the bad things and not the good things? This is it's a big question. I would say we do need a presence in the internet that is positive too, and it is important to speak up for the right things too. But then again, sometimes I feel like I don't want to talk about this in the internet right now, because do you know the process of a shitstorm? I just stumbled across that word a week ago. Watching a documentary just on this word. That was really interesting. So there's a lot of dynamic in the internet, and a lot of things can happen. And what is happening there, especially in the case of a shitstorm, is not. Sorry for getting that word again. Yeah, it's not representative of what a society believes. We have the big mass that is not in this interaction, is not engaged in these kind of interactions, so it doesn't display our democratic beliefs, us as a whole society. It just shows us about what a small part of society can do and how they use the internet to radicalize. And another thing about the internet, which is important to keep in mind, it's so easily accessible and it's so anonymous. A lot of things that you read there, no one would ever say that out loud here, right now, in front of all of you. So the internet is one of the biggest challenges that we will have to face in the future.
I bet if we had a bet $10 who was going to use profanity first, it would have not, it would have been me. So.
And I'm thinking that's not going to appear in that circle around Jesse Mercer anytime soon.
That's right.
I don't think.
The one comment that I would make is what I think all of us have seen happen in this country specifically, and maybe around the world, is decorum. There's such a lack of decorum, and I would just encourage all of you not to repost garbage. If you can't source it, if you don't know what it is, don't click like, don't resend it. You know, think about what's out there, because there's so much bad stuff out there. Let's just try to stop a little bit of it, you know, and pick up a good newspaper or a good book, and let's try to disseminate accurate information instead of just garbage.
Very good, very good. And our last question right here, please, if you'll come and state your name and your question.
I'm Steve Scalcott. I'm just an interested citizen, and both presentations were excellent. I'm so thankful that I took the time to be here this evening and to have y'all what you presented, and including how you've responded to questions. Ann-Kathrin, I wanted to come to you and ask a little bit more explanation, and the reason about your presentation on the 3 extremist groups that you described, or that you did in your presentation. Because I'll acknowledge to you that I'm not so certain that we don't experience similar things here in the United States, okay? So with that, the question I have to you is, what is perhaps the core, then being in the extremes outside of the normal democratic order, wanting to influence it, what is the kind of message that each of the right, left, and Islamism are trying to convey? And I'm asking that to try to get a sense of what we mean by these outside groups.
That's a tough question. Okay. For me, always the most difficult thing is to think about the answer in German and then translate it into somehow proper English terms, because terminology plays a big role in these issues. And yeah, I will try not to do that again. When we think about right wing, we think about racism. We think about an ideology that is based on a certain ideal in terms of human beings and how they should be like, and that is very exclusive. It is, when you think about stereotyping again, what I talked about earlier, it is about putting very strong stereotypes to different ethnicities. And also, I think right now, when we think about right-wing extremism, there's a lot of fear there. It's fear of the stranger, fear of we don't know, and a fear that something could change, this feeling of I want to go back to what I knew. And of course, this is this is not unique to Germany. I think you know you can apply that to other situations and other people too. Left-wing extremism, it's the idea of equality, but in the most extreme way. The idea of communism, but also anarchy. These are the most important ideas connected to that extremist group. And the last one, Islamism. Here we have we have strong religious feelings, and there's also the term fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is a very extreme version of the Islam, and it is used by extremists to convey their political messages. So that's why it's important to say Islam is not Islamism, and also fundamentalism is not Islamism. And here we have people who are fanatic about certain ideas and who do not They also just use a very small range out of the religious sphere and leave out the rest. So this is not what religion is about and not what the message of the religion is. So very different ideologies. Yeah, very different.
I wish that you would help me again thank our two presenters, Ann-Kathrin Kuder and Jeff Battcher. I think they will have a moment to linger down in the front if you have other questions. And I want to announce that March 22nd is our next event here at 6 o'clock in Willingham Auditorium. We'll look forward to seeing you then.